to get the ball rolling.
Thanks, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy that you're here. We want to let you know that the session's being captioned. It is being recorded. You can turn on the live captioning at the bottom of your screen and show the subtitles to enable them. If you would, we'd love for you to put your pronouns in your name, your Zoom name, so that we can engage thoughtfully in that way. The schedule of the day looks a little bit like we have presentations at the top of every hour. There's a 10-minute break in between. No need to have your camera on. We hope that you'll engage in any way that you feel comfortable. Please do save your questions for the end and throw them in the chat if you'd like. We are excited to have our first presentation today, Promoting Engagement on Your Team with Clayton Kolb, Barrett McGee, and Adriane Reilly. I am happy to manage your chat as questions come in, and we will kick it on over to you.
Super. Thank you, Lexi. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for the presentation part and control that, but we're excited to be here and talk to you about promoting engagement on your team. And I think what's really, we've talked about this, what's really important is that this isn't necessarily just your work team, right? This could be an office team, it could be a working team, it could be a committee, it could be something you do in any kind of surrounding work and field. So we're not going to dive into what the definition of engagement is. I think we're all aware of that, and we do that on a continual basis. So we're going to skip the 15 slides on defining what that means. So hopefully, if you have questions about that, we can unpack that later. But we really wanted to give some practical examples and lived experiences. So think about this as your living case study of what we've experienced over the past year, broken down into maybe 3 sections. So my co-presenters and I each are going to tackle one section, and then hopefully I'll give you some tips and tricks along the way and things to consider as you think about how do you engage with your team and whatever your team may be, right? We all have, I said this in the forefront, but you may have a team of peers. You may have a team that you report with. You may have a team that reports to you. You may have a team of volunteers. So use team and interchangeably and whatever makes sense for you and what you can take away from different aspects. So one of the most important things in creating promoting engagement is creating the culture for which that engagement can thrive and last a long time. And so when I joined this institution and joined this team, part of the vision casting of a director is to kind of create the culture and help create a successful culture alongside of the team. So this first part, I'm going to talk a little bit about creating the culture, setting the tone, big picture, philosophy and goals and things of that nature. And then we're going to move into some more practical areas of communication that Adriane's going to cover, and then wrap up with items for like professional development, ongoing development, and interactions, and Barrett's going to cover that. So wanted to kind of hit this 3-pronged piece on creating a culture. So defining who we are as a team, unit as a team, it's important to create a clear mission, vision, and values as a department. That was really important to us coming in. So when I arrived, we had a mission statement, but we did not have a vision and values as a department. And those pieces are integral into knowing who you are. I use this analogy all the time. My team laughs at me because I like using bad analogy. Like, I think they're good in my head, but sometimes they don't translate well. But thinking about it as a road, right? And so if our work is a road, the pavement and the direction in which we're going is kind of our mission, right? And the vision is the roadmap where we're trying to go, and the guardrails serve as your values. So they keep you in line with trying to stay within the direction of you're heading. So using those things are really instrumental. If you don't have guardrails and you're going down a tight curve and you fall off the cliff, well, that's not going to be good for your organization and longevity. So those are really important. So we wanted to make sure that those were captured in this process. So I'm going to quickly share, this slide goes back, and also that we're displaying it. So we took we took time to develop our vision, develop our values, so that we could fully integrate them into the work that we're doing. So for example, we have transitioned our student, staff, and leader awards in the department to be less arbitrary and maybe named awards that don't have as much recognition any longer, and they're now going to be based on our values, which we think is really important in helping kind of, again, understand the culture in which we are in. And then our vision is not you typically think of a vision statement, it's like very concise, or it's maybe one or two sentences. And because we're unique department, we have a lot of attributes. We wanted to make sure we capture everything. So think creatively about your vision of who you are and where you want to go. Don't limit yourself to just what has always been done, and thinking about how do you further expand your vision to make yourselves move forward. So this is just taken from our website. So not only are we trying to live by this, we want to make sure it's visible. We're thinking of ways to create it visibly in our office. We're going to put a really cool plexiglass kind of marker in the main administrative suite that one of our graphic design students is putting up there, to always anchor us down and make sure that it is part of who we are as a unit. So back to creating the culture, the next step, especially in my role as the leader of the team, and remember thinking about any team, if whatever role you have, is you want to cast a vision for the future. And so a good way that you can do this is by taking time to listen. If you're on a new team, or you're forming a new team, or you're coming onto a team new, creating an opportunity to do listening tours with all members of the team is vital. That's something, again, as a lived experience that has worked really well, is taking the time to meet with each individual and small groups of the team to find out like what's going well, what's not going well, where are areas of improvement, where do you see this team and this work being in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, where do you see yourself the next 2 to 3 years, 5 years, or thinking about a program, where can this program go, or has the program made it to the end of its lifespan? Is it time to sunset this program or transition it to another variation of that? So it's really important when you're thinking about how to engage folks in the process to listen. We're actually, not to jump ahead, we're doing a reading right now that talks a lot about listening. So I won't steal your thunder, Barrett, I promise, but you'll see the connection points there. And then the third part is share the next steps and create opportunities. So it's more than just buy-in. When you want to do engagement correctly, buy-in is important, because you want folks driving the car in the same direction, on my road analogy, right? We don't want bumper to bumper traffic or accidents or fender benders. We want to go in the same place. We want to get to Disney World, right? You're welcome, Adriane. But buy-in is important, but it's also creating an environment where everyone feels valued and part of the greater team. And by doing so, the work is more manageable. It's more fun to be around each other. Even on the most stressful days, or the days where we want to pull our hair out, or the air conditioning is not working and we're sweating to death, we're still able to do the work and do the work well, because we have built an environment in which we are succeeding and supporting one another. And it's okay to have fun once in a while. And actually, you should have fun once in a while, whether that's random dance parties, which happen sometimes on Fridays in my office, or grabbing coffee, or just catching up on happenings for the week. Right. And you want to be able to have those moments to kind of recenter, reground yourself in the work and what we're doing. So what I wanted to share here, again, I said this was kind of our living case study for what we have done this past year, is I'm going to share with you what I shared with the team and my supervisors last year after my listening tour, as a practical example of something that you may be able to use or push forward. So after I had gone through and did my listening tour and looked through all the data and looked through the information and kind of said, okay, we're in this weird place. We're in COVID. We're all working remotely. I haven't even been to my building for like a day yet. Where do I go from here? And part of it was trying to just create some priorities for the year, so we knew what our work was grounded in. It's really important. As I said before, you have your mission, your vision, your values, but where are you going with that? Like, what are you hoping to achieve? And so last year created some departmental priorities, and this is the exact presentation that I shared with the team and what is guiding a lot of the work right now. So some of our easy or immediate targets were department name, intentional integration of Sykes student union and student activities. There was still some disconnect in that, and there's a long history of where student activities and where the union has gone. So we made some intentional effort to update the name to be Sykes Union and Student Activities, to draw us in as one team, which creates less divide in the work and where people fall in that process, and also helps to share the external story to our folks in the division as well as on campus, and to our students that we are one unit, even though there's still some intricacy pieces where SSI is involved and there's other things, but forward facing, people don't need to know the depth of the story. They need to know that we're one unit. We did a merger of Rams After Hours and Student Activities Council, again, showing that continuity of team and making sure that we're being intentional about the work and efficient about the work and supporting the students' work. It's important that you don't have two of the largest programming entities on campus fighting over space and time and the same audience. So making sure that that was consistent. So that was, again, an internal move. And we were working on our own strategic plan. We know the division's working on a strategic plan. And so we don't want to put the cart before the horse. So we were starting to think through how do we prepare ourselves for that process while also letting the division do its thing. So when the division has a strategic plan, ours would mesh in nicely, because nothing squashes engagement and productivity when you have competing interests. And so we wanted to make sure that whatever we're doing is in alignment with what the division and the university is doing, so it's seamless and it creates a more efficient process. And then finally, within these priority areas, we created working groups or working teams, we call them. And so I came up with 3, based on everything that I was hearing from all the meetings with all the individuals on the team, created 3 priority working groups. So we had the student experience, department work, and affirming spaces. And so these allowed opportunities for each member of the team to take part in. So everyone was required to be in at least one of these working groups. And then out of these, we also asked for one person to be the convener. And so for some, it allowed some of our folks that maybe weren't already in leadership positions to kind of take the opportunity to take some leadership and ownership of the process. So they convene the group, they kind of set the schedule. I meet with the conveners to see where we're going throughout the process. And so we're creating levels of engagement throughout the organization in order to, one, move the work forward, but also provide folks the opportunity to grow and experience and then make the actual things happen. So this is all our professional staff and our graduate assistants. We have 4 of those currently, and they're all involved in this process as well. So just real quick, I'll touch on them just because we're up here. We have our student experience. So that's our comprehensive process from student staff to student leaders and how they're engaging in the work, anything from learning goals to what we hope they achieve, from the hiring to when they move on, and everything in between. Our department, we're creating infrastructure, standing operating procedures, the why and how of what we do and how we do it, and creating really fundamental layers of support under that, which some of that bleeds into what Adriane's going to share. And then our affirming spaces, a lot of the work with the inclusion and diversity, but we have bought into this definition of affirming space that it goes beyond the brave or safe space, where it's not necessarily those just like, oh, everyone feels welcome to everything. But the affirmation is that no matter when you go to a space, whether it's our building or program, that the individual is affirmed by seeing themselves reflected in that space or program. And so it's a more intentional effort, and it's really challenging. And this is taking us a long time to come to fruition with, but we're really excited and can't wait to present about the affirming space audit visit that we're having in November that some of you may be part of, but that's going to be really exciting when we get there. So all of this engagement piece is from a big picture, philosophical, goal setting, forward momentum piece. And it's really important to create entry levels for all folks within the organization to do that. So that's a lot of big picture stuff. I'm going to kick it over to Adriane, who's going to talk through some of the communication aspects.
Thank you. So our communications, I'm going to spend most of the time talking about how we use Microsoft Teams to communicate effectively across our teams. This is like the most amount of times we can say Teams, and then also it has different meanings too. So it's like the word is we're just inundating you with that word. Clayton, what's the best way to tell you to advance the slide that isn't too annoying? Wrong way. There we go. Okay.
I say just give me like a thumbs up or something and I'll do it.
Okay. So when Clayton arrived as our director, he introduced us to Microsoft Teams. He had been using it previously and had a lot of great ideas for how it could improve the way we communicate with one another. And he set the expectation that we would use it to communicate as a team. Working from home during the pandemic also provided another good reason to utilize a cloud-based communication tool. So I know my husband at work, he utilizes Slack. I have my own thoughts about different project management tools and things. And I think Microsoft Teams offers both project management and communication, like chat options, to really kind of unify our work and keep us keep our documents all in one place, and keep us on the same page. So at this point, we've worked through any hesitations over this shared communications platform that we may have had, and it's become a vital part of our departmental culture. One of those things would be, one of the tricks to it becoming part of the culture and getting past those hesitations would be to take some time to get to know the features. Clayton already had experience. He kind of pointed us and set things up for us. He set up the channels, and I'll show you the different ways with some screenshots coming up, the different ways that we're using it. But Clayton set the structure for it, and I did my own homework in watching some videos and consulting the Microsoft support website and figuring out what features does Teams already have that we could make use of, that could make us more efficient, or that could like replicate what we're already doing, but all in one place. And I think that's the really key point to using something like Teams, is because everything's here in this one spot. And it's not like over here for chat, over here for documents, over here for a task list, over here for shifts. So I think the final piece of information before we dive in with some screenshots is to imagine Teams as a frame. I think some people get confused at the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint and Teams and the Microsoft products that we offer, or that are offered to us from IS&T. So if you think of Teams like a frame through which you view the documents that you have in SharePoint, and SharePoint is the version that everyone can share, as opposed to OneDrive, where it's only your access unless you give someone access to it. So when you link the two, Teams becomes a browser for you to be able to see all of those documents. And another part of establishing that shared culture of like effective communication is committing and having the team, lowercase t, the team commit to putting everything in Teams or SharePoint. Because if someone else needs access to it, then it goes on Teams, it goes on SharePoint. I've seen kind of the downfall of departments that utilize only something like OneDrive, where if someone leaves the team, or if someone's out on leave, or if someone's even just on a sick day, and you don't have access to the documents you need because they're kind of like hoarding it on their OneDrive or on their computer's hard drive. And this eliminates this. Where is it? It's in Teams. I know where it is. I understand how like the files break down, and I can find answers to the questions I have independently, which I think kind of helps us maintain our efficiency. All right, Clayton, go ahead to the next slide. So this gives you a little insight into my team and the different teams I have set up in the program. So we have a separate team for our professional staff, which are our full-time employees and our graduate assistants, and that's the Sykes and Student Activities team. And also the Sykes student staff is for our student staff. And for some reason, when you create a team through IS&T, it like forces you to have the like parentheses team, and that's why it says that. I don't know why. Student Activities has their own, and Rams After Hours has their own as well. Go ahead, Clayton, to the next slide. Okay, So on the left-hand side, and now this is zooming into the Sykes and student activities professional staff team. We have different channels on the left-hand side that focus the topics of our posts and the organization of documents and other tabs. So for example, the working groups that Clayton mentioned are under the department information emoji, fire emoji channel. And above the top, like the view you're looking at will say general above the top in the middle. And you can see that this is a snapshot of the posts that we make, or like announcements that we have for one another. And that's everyone on our staff, the professional staff, can see these posts. The files tab will show you our files, and there's another screenshot later so you can see how we organize our files as well. The staff notebook is where we keep our agendas for our staff meetings. And I'll reference this later, but we have OneNote linked to Teams. So we have SharePoint linked, we have OneNote linked. And that allows us to have keep a running document, like a running file folder of our agendas from our staff meetings, and anyone can go in and access that. It's a really collaborative environment for sure. Oh, I didn't make a screenshot of it, but for the building manager channel on our student staff team, they have posts related to their work in operating the building. They have all the files they need access to, such as their shift logs, and they have a tab that links them to our internal work order form so that they can communicate directly to us, and then we can put in the official, like the TMA work order form. Everything the building managers needs are in Teams. They're added as soon as training begins. And they teach one another how to use it, and their own little tips and tricks that they found. We've asked them to put it on their phone so that we can communicate with them either during their rounds of the building, or if they're not on shift and we have to ask them questions, or get in touch with them, or they have to ask one another questions. Typically we were using GroupMe before this, and the combination of having the shared documents and the chat feature all together, again, just kind of concentrates us all in one place. This is where we live and work, kind of in the cloud. One of the other techniques we used for onboarding our students into teams and establishing that culture among them is a repurposed Teams scavenger hunt that I borrowed from the Center for Women and Gender Equity. And it was like a list of tasks that they would have to do with a checklist through Teams, and it would show them how to engage in the different kinds of posts and look for documents in certain channels and so on and so forth. So that was a really useful way to get them to understand what we're doing and learn all the different features. Announcements are continually posted on the posts section, and our student staff are expected to check it frequently and to use it during their shifts. We can tell who isn't paying attention to Teams, and then we'll have a conversation about our expectations to make sure that they're looking where they're supposed to learn what they need to learn to be successful on a shift. Go ahead to the next slide, thanks. Here is a glimpse into how we organize the building manager's files. So again, our SharePoint is linked, and this is a frame into which we're looking at our SharePoint. So I'm in the building manager's channel, as you can see on the left-hand side. And here I'm midpoint of the screen down shows all the the staff meetings, the building furniture, all the different folders that hold our documents that they need. And then you're able to pin the most important things. So we have the building manager manual, we have the PDF to the mask compliance policy, and an incident form as well. So it really allows you to focus on certain things that they need frequently, and organize things well so that they can find what they're looking for. Go ahead to the next slide. One of the features that I enjoy using is the praise feature, and it's through the posts. So if you look at the bottom of the middle of the screen, where it says type a new message, there is let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 images over. It looks like a little award pin That is the praise feature. So you tag who you want to give praise to. And in this case, one of our building managers, Kaylee, tagged her peers, Oren and Taylor, and customized a message. And you can pick different kinds of praise. So that one is the awesome praise. And there's like teamwork or problem solving or I forget what other focused topical kinds of praise that you want to give. Gratitude, I forget, different things like that. So you can pick it, it comes with a cute little image and it sort of shouts out people. And then you'll notice that Kaylee had 5 people, was that 5 people who loved it. And so the engagement of like a thumbs up or a sad face or an angry face or a heart, is pretty similar to texting nowadays. And I think that's pretty appealing for not only our student staff, but it is for us, when you're like, okay, I've seen it, I give it a thumb up. It doesn't like really require a full-on response, but like, you'll know that I've seen it. And so, one of my other favorite features is that you can tag people. So if you have a message specifically for someone that you're posting and you want to call them out, you can tag them and they'll get a notification. There's another feature that I use that is, you can tag the name of your team. So it would be Sykes student staff, and that gives everyone in the group a notification. But I've also created tags for specific positions. So I have a building manager's tag and an operations specialist tag and a copy center tag. And I can copy center. And now that's giving a notification specifically to my copy center staff. There is a channel for them to converse amongst themselves, but when I want to make sure that it gives them a push notification, that's when I use the tag for their position. Another integration is with shifts. So with shifts, there is also an tag that I would do like building managers, and it would, so my tag that I talked about previously was just BM, and that differentiates itself from when you tag building managers, because then that will pull from whoever is on shift currently in accordance with the shift feature. Too many of the same names. And it will message and notify the folks who are currently working. So if you don't want to go back over to shifts and be like, who do I need to talk to like right now? That's a really helpful way to get in touch with the proper people at the moment. So shifts is one of those features that required a little bit of like looking through videos and making sure that it had what we needed. We had transitioned, because I don't want to use the same word again. We had transitioned away from another scheduling software and time management, like clock in, clock out software that we were paying for. And it just wasn't fitting our needs. It really wasn't designed for like higher education or the kind of operation that we use. And Shifts has just enough features to like make it work for us. So it's got the time management. It pulls reports from when they clocked in, clocked out compared to when they were scheduled. It allows them to drop a shift or swap the shift to another person on their own, which really allows for more communication and more efficiency in how we are covering our time and our operations. And we don't have to pay for it too, it's free. So this is just, like a smart decision on our part to save some money and to utilize the tools that we are provided for free. Okay, so the next slide is also another feature that we used called, they combined 2 different features, and now it's called Tasks by Planner and To Do. And I'm hoping eventually they just combine that name and make it into one. But I use this a lot with my GA, and it's how we communicate what needs to get done, when it needs to get done by, and like the status of different things. So I say, like, if we have an idea, write it down. Put it in teams. So our preferred view of our tasks is by board, you'll see, and then it gives you buckets of different topics for your tasks. So she'll put things in there for me, I'll put things in there for her. And it's super helpful to keep us on task and to see where we're at any given moment with what we're working on. And finally, I do think that's the last part that I wanted to share. We have a kind of an expectations and a disciplinary system for our student workers called EARL, which stands for Expectations Are Real Life. And I made that up and I'm trying to make it work. And again, as a way to streamline all of the work that we have and all the different documents that we have, it used to live in a Google form. And I was like, let's do away with that. So Jana actually in her exploration of the different features that Teams has to offer, found that with the integration with OneNote, in this staff notebook, you'll see up top in the middle, each person could get their own private notebook. And then where it says the master URL tracker under leader only, Jana, who's my GA, Jana and I are the leaders and we have access to the master URL tracker, but none of the students, they can only access their own tracker. So they can see where they are at any given standpoint with their disciplinary points and what they were for. And you know, you can take a look at that little chart that she made. So it's a way that we can privately communicate with each one of them, again, all in one place. Everything they need is in Teams. So finally, for my little section, under tips and tricks, just a reminder that if you build it, they will come. It's about success is about first creating a culture of use. The more things that are located there, the more they are going to engage with it. And it might require you to lean into some discomfort at first. I know people have varying levels of comfort with new technology, but if you create that culture, create the expectation, and kind of like deal with the initial hesitations, eventually it will become second nature. And then I say, like, spread joy by sharing your knowledge. So the other day, one of us realized that, like, hey, do you know if you hover your mouse over like the back arrow in Teams, it'll show you a list of like the windows and the documents that you've recently accessed. You have to get over the speed bumps. Yeah, thanks, Clayton. And so, or do you know, like, if it's someone said, oh, I wish I could edit 2 documents at one time. Sure, open this document in browser and this document in Teams, or this document in your application, which would open it directly into Word, and you'll have access to those things. So, you know, this is still fairly new for us. We've been working with it for about 1.5 years. And we, you know, love helping one another out by like, oh, I just figured this out. Oh, I just figured that out. And so that's been kind of a journey that we're sharing together, and it helps us make our work even more efficient. Back to you, Barrett.
Thank you. So like Clayton mentioned, I'm going to talk about professional development within our department and within our team. So oftentimes when we think about professional development, we think of going to conferences, and Sarah, you mentioned that at the beginning, and obviously over the pandemic, we weren't able to go to those conferences that we are typically accustomed to going to. So we wanted to create opportunities within the department for both ongoing learning and growth. And one of the largest ways that we did that was through our book club. You can go to the next slide. It'll probably be easy to know when I'm transitioning to slides, but I'll still tell you. So last year in the fall semester, we started our book club, a common read among the entire staff. And this was the professional and the graduate assistant staff. So we only did one book a semester. And at the start of the semester, everyone knew which chapters they would need to read by which week. So it was pretty easily digestible. Folks had plenty of time to read the areas in the given amount of time. But even if they hadn't, we were pretty flexible and sometimes modified our schedule if folks weren't able to read the chapters in time. The book club really wasn't meant to be stress inducing, so we tried to keep that in mind, and we're pretty flexible about making accommodations if we needed to. But reading a book over the course of the semester, one book over the course of the semester, was still pretty easily digestible for folks. We had designated meeting times set aside for our book club discussion, so they were outside of our regular staff meetings. They didn't take away time from the things that we needed to talk about at our staff meetings, but they also gave staff an extra opportunity to get to know one another and participate in fellowship. And during these meetings, folks were able to bring up things that they found relevant in the book, things that they found insightful, things that they disagreed with, that was encouraged as well, things that they thought were profound. And it really was an amazing glimpse into other team members and their understanding of how they think, and recognizing that not everyone reads something the same way or may have different thoughts about a particular topic. So we learned a lot about each other through this process. Our first book was How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. It was a dense read, but it was extremely important and a relevant one. The next book was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. And then this semester, as Clayton mentioned, we're currently reading We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter by Celeste Headley. So what I find really interesting about our book club is that we started using this information that we learned in the books while reading. And that sort of seems like an obvious observation. Like, of course you would use the information that you're reading. Why wouldn't you? What's the point of reading it if you're not going to do it? But I'll be honest, I think when we first started this book club, I thought, yeah, we would read the books, we would find it really insightful, we would think, hey, that's great, but then we would go back to our day-to-day work. And we probably, I thought they wouldn't have that much impact on our work, but I was really surprised by the fact that how much it is having an impact on our work. So we're using the 5 dysfunctions of a team to help help inform our teamwork philosophy. And we've actually passed that on to our student staff during training. We had them listen to a podcast that helps sums up the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So it was a little bit more easily digestible for them. And it now is, it's the framework for our teamwork philosophy that we're using with staff. How to Be Anti-Racist was brought up a lot in the Affirming Spaces working team that Clayton mentioned. It was a very large factor into why we're bringing external consultants through ACY in a few weeks. And even though we haven't finished it, our current book, How to Have Conversations That Matter, is informing how we might think about evaluating our staff. We would typically evaluate our student staff on oral communication, which we know is a great skill that employers are looking for. But do we actually really want to evaluate them on conversational competence, which is similar, but also different? So these reads have been really refreshing to see the insights and messages from the books get brought up in our conversation about our work and actually informs our work to a great deal. I also want to share just a little anecdote about the book club, because if you're familiar with our staff, you might know Anne Callahan, who ever since I've worked with her, and it's been over 12 years now, she has always said, I'm not a reader, I'm not a reader. And I was actually very worried that she would be really hesitant and resistant to the book club, but I was extremely surprised because she always came prepared. She always came having read the assigned chapters and came with notes and came with topics that she wanted to bring up and always made sure to share during the book club time. So I just shared that because I think sometimes we think that staff members may be hesitant to certain things. But I think, again, if you're building that culture of that we want to have ongoing conversations, we want to have ongoing growth and learning and development just within your team, then I think folks will come to that. If you build it, they will come. So even if you have people on your staff that aren't readers, they may be pleasantly surprised by the book club. I would just add to that it's about being intentional with the books that you choose and making sure they're applicable to your work. So that's what we really did. We sought out books that were applicable to us or felt important to us. In a moment, I'm going to talk about ongoing opportunities, but the book club provides another ongoing opportunity for professional development and growth. I suggested the book We Need to Talk this semester because I had read about 70% of it and wanted to read the rest of it, and never got around to it. And we ended up choosing that book, and Clayton asked me if I could lead some of the sessions for that. So because I had some familiarity with the book. So I don't know if it was a good thing, I suggested the book and then I got to lead some sessions, but it's good. It was a good growth opportunity for me to lead some of the book club discussions about a book that I was already familiar with. Next slide, please. So over the summer, we established some awards just among us and among our department. So we all know that morale can be kind of low with the ever-changing nature of the pandemic. So department awards were sort of a fun way to help boost that morale, and also recognize people for the work that they're doing and the positive contributions that they're making to our team. So the awards that we created were the Ramey Award for those who go above and beyond, or they put in particular effort, or they worked really hard on a specific project. And then we created another award called the Joy Award for those that always have a positive outlook and go out of their way to spread joy in our department. So this is a great, the Joy Award is a particularly great award because it connects to our values, which Clayton talked about earlier. Always being able to connect things back to your values is a whole other presentation, but I just wanted to highlight that. So each award has, we represent each award with sort of a physical objects. We have a little stuffed Ramey that gets passed around to whoever wins the Ramey Award. And we have a figurine from Joy from the movie Inside Out that gets passed to each recipient who receives the Joy Award. These are just the awards we started with. We might add more in the future. They're meant to be informal and fun, but just because it's informal doesn't mean it's not intentional. And so if you would want to replicate this in something among your team, you could ask team members to nominate other team members for different awards. It's nice knowing that you're getting recognition from your teammate and then seeing it brought up in front of the rest of the staff. That's a really good feeling. But I would also make sure that you're coming up with awards that again are applicable to your team and your department, things that you think that they'll enjoy, that they'll resonate with, and that may that probably link back to your values. Next slide, please. So like I talked about earlier, it's important to always be on the lookout for what are the ongoing opportunities and areas of growth for you and your team members for staff development, particularly if it means a staff member can learn a new skill, learn a new system, or do something that's outside of their normal scope. So for example, we haven't had an assistant director for the past few months who it's their responsibility to do reservations for all faculty and staff in our building. So that's allowed me to learn 25 Live from the back end and confirm reservations, something that I thought that I would never do, and that's something that I've never done before. In addition, I've also learned Social Tables, which is a software we use to do room setups and layouts. So now when the assistant director is hired, I can serve as a resource or a backup to that person. Plus, it's a great development opportunity for me as well. Another example is our annual report. So we decided to create an annual report to synthesize all of our hard work that we put in over the past year. And that project was assigned to Adriane and I. But we've never done an annual report before. And we had we thought we knew what we were doing, but turns out we had little idea as to what we were doing. But I remember thinking when we were assigned that I was actually really excited to do it because I had never done it before. It was challenging, but in a good way, because at the end of it, we had something tangible that I could say, yes, I did this. I co-authored this report and I know how to do it again if the situation calls us for it. So it was something that was good for the department because it showcased all of our hard work, but it was good for me as well as an individual and a professional, learning how to do something new that I now have experience with and that I can now teach others with. So be always on the lookout for those new opportunities for your teammates, whether it's doing committee work, whether it's being on a working team, whether it's chairing the working team. As Clayton mentioned, we selected folks within our department to chair those working teams, be the convener, and that was a different leadership opportunity for them, particularly those who probably haven't had the opportunity to chair a group of folks, to chair a committee. And it's sometimes a little bit easier to do it with staff members that they're familiar with, like, that they know, and then to be able to do it on a larger committee. If it's shadowing another office, whatever you do, it's important that we're recognizing creating these ongoing development opportunities. It takes communication among your teams and among your supervisor to know what a team member might be interested in learning. So if you don't know what some of the skills or processes or systems that a team member wants to learn, ask them. I think that's really important. It could be that they've never thought about it because they didn't think it was appropriate or beneficial, but it is beneficial to them and it is beneficial to the department. So Clayton, now I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Barrett. Thanks, Adriane. So that was just a glimpse into some of the efforts that we've made throughout the last year to create ongoing engagement. And it is ongoing work, right? Constantly looking for ways to bring the team together, to try new things, as Brene Brown would say, to rumble with things as they come up. And hopefully there was something that you were able to glean from something, whether it was a tip on Teams, Microsoft Teams, or an idea for a book club or ongoing professional development opportunity. But there's a lot of elements, and there's so much more we could share, but we wanted to give you a little bit of a glimpse. So I know we're at time, and I know there's a little bit of break, but we're happy to hang on for a couple minutes if there's any questions or anything else, as long as Sarah and Lexi and folks don't kick us out. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. We would never kick you out. What a cool session to talk about engagement. Sounds like there's amazing things happening in Sykes, and that's really cool. I would like to provide the space if anyone wants to ask questions. I know I certainly have one in mind. If we are a little bit shyer to ask questions, but feel free to throw those in the chat. I guess I will just ask a question. So if someone's watching this and they're like, watching this today or watching this on the recording, and they're like, oh, okay, we're not doing any of this in my department. How do we get started? What does that look like? I'd like to pose that to you all.
I think from my perspective, and I'll let either Adriane or Barrett or both chime in as well. I think part of it is just taking the risk to push something forward. So from my position coming in and seeing that we were a team that needed a lot of melding, that's why the 5 dysfunctions of a team book was so important, because we really needed to get at the root of who we were as a team. We were all individuals doing work and could kind of talk. But we had to have some strong conversations and setting the tone. We did a little winter retreat as well, which was remote. But we did some fun and game stuff, but we did some really deep dives into things like trust. But then I think it's being able to just throw an idea out there and having the ability to kind of present a solution and a plan to have that solution come to fruition. It's harder when you maybe have smaller teams or there's a disconnect. And so maybe sometimes it's opportunities to how do you partner with another unit or another team to kind of grow that expanse? I don't know, Barrett, Adriane, if you have any other feedback.
I think what I'll share too is that while we're presenting all of this right now, we didn't do all of this at the same time. So it's not like there was one staff meeting where we're okay, we're going to do a book club, we're going to do an annual report, we're going to do we're going to launch all of this right now. We did this over the course of a year and rolled out different sections of it at different times. So that's important to remember, because I think if you try to implement all of this at one time, it can be overwhelming to staff and to other team members. So making sure that you're doing it, in a way that's easily digestible for them.
I also think, to kind of connect what they are both saying, and use Clayton's road analogy. When Clayton presented those earlier slides to our team with the departmental priorities, like an annual report was on that list, and the book club was sort of like, the ideas were there and they were presented to us all at one time, but we did roll it out. And so like we knew what his vision was, and we knew what the year had in store for us. And so we could prepare for that. But again, it didn't like everything didn't just start all at the same time.
I think, sorry, I have less of a question and just more of a comment, and I really appreciated all of this, and I glanced at the annual report. Nice job at that. I think the teams section really resonated with me, because any of you who are on one of my committees know that I have gone all in on teams and I've embraced it, but I appreciated sort of learning some of the like nuances of teams that I didn't know about. But I think that as you were talking about it, it's so annoying that we have to, it's not available to students, right? We have to have special permission to include our students in that. And like, I'm thinking particularly for SGA, like my SGA, you know, they're using Google Docs. Like I can't access it, right? Or I can, but it's just, I wish that I could just set them up on a team site, and, you know, each committee could have a channel or whatever the language is, but I don't know. I'm more like just venting, but I just think that there's so much, it has so much capability that I wish we could bring our students in on this.
And the cool thing with Teams is you can bring people from external organizations into it. So if you're doing a collaboration with folks from different institutions, you could always invite them into your team. I also have my own like director team that's just me, so that all my stuff is there, so that I can easily transition things or move things around too. So that way, again, it's living in one spot.
I think that the challenge is they have to have an organizational website. Like I was trying to bring someone into a team who was like interning for the mayor, but because he didn't have, he was using a Gmail account, and IT wouldn't allow him to come in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, with SGA, so we're working with a student staff of 50. I give them, before training, I give IS&T the list and say, please give licenses to these 50 students. And then on my end, I add them. And so I understand your frustration, Sarah, but it's not impossible to get SGA onto Teams. And I totally believe in the benefits and think they would, you and them would really work well on the platform.
I just think I need their buy-in, right? Because they're, you know, like slowly I've been trying to culturally get them to RAM Connect, right? RAM Connect, right? If the stuff is living on Google and you all go away, like nobody can get it, right?
Yeah.
Like in terms of sustainability, like it's not a good system.
Well, I just want to thank our presenters again. I think that this was a great conversation. I think there's ongoing conversation we can have about that. I want to say kudos to your team for doing the book club. I think we talk a lot about book clubs and student affairs, and they never really work. So kudos to your team for really making that happen and then applying that work. So thank you all. We want to be mindful of time. We did intentionally schedule some breaks. We will have our next session that starts at 10. And it is the Student Athlete Success, Integrating Theory as a Way to Focus Programming with Kellyanne Milliner and Maddie Evans. So they will hopefully be popping in here soon to start at 10. But thank you so much. And thank you for your commitment to professional development, both in terms of this conference and also in terms of your presentation, which was all about professional development and engagement.